welcome to the Applications of Neuroscience and Healing. This is season 1, episode 1, if you will, and it's called the sleep paradox. And sleep paradox is something that's really, really important to me. Sleep is important to me. I use it as a primary piece of evidence with every client I work with. All of my clients are traumatized, and the number one symptom of their trauma is sleep. And so this is really important to me. I'd like to start with a story. I'd like you all to sit back and imagine that maybe it's 1944, and there's a military sentry standing on a hill. And this military sentry was posted there late in 1944, before the end of the war. And they're in a small outpost above a village. Now, this sentry's orders were really simple. He was to stay there and watch the road. And if the enemy appeared on the road, he needs to sound the alarm if anyone comes. Now, he has a rifle, he has some water, he has an amazing view of the valley that he's monitoring. And when the war ended in 1945, nobody came to get him. The radio in his pack stopped crackling. The village below that he's monitoring went dark each night and lit up each morning, and the seasons passed, and they passed, but nobody came up to his hill to relieve him. But being a good soldier, he kept watching. And he watched through the next season and the next season, and he watched through every season after that. He watched the road in the dark, he watched the road in the rain. He watched the road when there was nothing on it for 100 miles and nothing had been on it for years. He was tired. He'd never been so tired in his life, but he couldn't put the rifle down because his last orders he received were to watch the road. And nobody told him the orders had changed. And I want you to hold that image of that sentry in mind for the next 12 minutes or so. The exhausted sentry, still at his post, still hypervigilant, decades after the threat has passed. And we're going to come back to him later. So I want you to sit back, settle in, and I want you to settle into your chair. And I want you to feel just the weight of your shoulders. I want you to press your back against the cushion of your chair. Make contact with the floor with your feet. And there's something specific I want your body to register before we start. I want it to register any fatigue or stress that it's been carrying. Maybe something you didn't quite release today. The held breath you did not know you were holding. And I want you to just listen for a moment. I want you to listen to the quiet of the room you're in. You might hear small sounds underneath the quiet. You might hear the voice of somebody where you are. You might hear my voice. And I might ask you something specific. And then I want you to get a picture in your mind. I want you to get the image of someone you know, who you care for, who has not slept properly in the last 6, 12 months, maybe a year, maybe 5 years. Maybe they haven't slept well for 20 years. And I want you to picture the bedroom where they lie awake at night. You know, the clock on their nightstand, the ceiling they've memorized, the way the light comes through the curtain at 3:47 in the morning. And that image is the reason we're here tonight. I'm not a sleep doctor, I'm not a psychiatrist, and I'm not a sleep researcher. I was a heavily traumatized ex-military member, and today I'm a coach, and I'm an explorer. I'm interested in how trauma can be healed. And I've spent the better part of 2 decades working with the nervous systems of people who could not sleep. Hundreds and hundreds of clients, and I've trained hundreds and hundreds of clinicians who've worked with thousands of clients. I've also had the privilege of doing a pilot study with survivors of human trafficking. And I've had a fair number of nights in my own life when the room would not get dark enough and the body would not get heavy enough and the morning came earlier than seemed legal. I know this picture from both sides. The picture I saw every week as my own trauma evolved, and the picture I've seen every week with my clients. And here's what shows up in my office, or on my computer screen, or perhaps in a presentation room after I give a talk, when somebody waits behind the chairs to ask one question. The picture is always very similar. The person's exhausted. Visibly, they're exhausted. Their skin is ashen. Their eyes actually don't have the life you'd expect to have in them. And they might tell me that they sleep 5, 6, 7, or 8 hours a night. And they wake unrested. They wake at 4 in the morning. Their brain comes on instantly. And the rest of the night's over. They've already done their homework. They've already cut out caffeine. They've moved the phone out of their bedroom. They've tried blackout curtains. And they've tried a meditation app. They've tried melatonin. Some of them may have tried a prescription. The prescription got them unconscious for 6 hours and gave them nothing else. They are tired. They are wired. Let me say that again. They are tired and wired. And that is the sleep paradox. Exhaustion and vigilance simultaneously in the same body. Sleep comes with permission. Sleep is not a performance thing we do. Matthew Walker at Berkeley says it really, really clearly. Sleep is not a behavior the brain performs. Sleep is a state the brain permits. I'll say that again. Sleep is not a behavior. Sleep requires permission. Your conscious mind cannot decide to be asleep. That's just not how it works. Otherwise, all of us would be sleep gods, right? We say, okay, time to sleep, time to wake up. And that's not how it works. The same way it cannot decide to digest something, your conscious mind. The descent into sleep is governed by the brainstem, by a particular part of your brainstem, and by the autonomic nervous system. And none of those structures are listening to your to-do list. Picture the sentry again. The brain that runs the check every night. It does not ask if I'm tired. It asks, is it safe to stand down? If the answer in the unconscious mind is no, you do not sleep. Or you might sleep lightly. Or you sleep 90 minutes and then a sound at the window opens your eyes and your night's done. This is biology. This is neurology. That's not a weakness. Trauma reorganizes your baseline. Bessel van der Kolk, all of you know Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote the book, The Body Keeps Score. Says that trauma is the persistence of a survival physiology after the threat has long since ended. That's the line. Survival physiology that did not get the memo. When a nervous system has lived through something where disengagement was unsafe, the system, your system, rewires itself around vigilance, elevated sympathetic arousal, altered cortisol rhythms, a hot amygdala that wants to go, and a brainstem that scans for threat all day and most of the night. It was adaptive in the original context, in that moment. When the traumatic event happened, when the tragedy happened, that's adaptation to be on high alert to protect you. But it's maladaptive once the original context has passed. Stephen Porges gives us the language. He talks about the vagus nerve, and the ventral vagus is the state from which sleep emerges. This is the safe connective part of our vagus nerve. Now, the vagus nerve is probably the biggest nerve in our body. Sympathetic mobilization is the state from which sleep is delayed because you're aroused. And dorsal vagal collapse is the state from which sleep mimics death, but it doesn't have a restorative quality. People talk about the vagus nerve all the time, but they don't differentiate between ventral and dorsal parts. The dorsal part of your vagus nerve, when people do the freeze and fawn part, that's your dorsal vagus nerve at work. So somebody who has unresolved serious negative events, potentially trauma, a trauma-impacted nervous system spends most of its hours in sympathetic and dorsal arousal. It has limited access to the ventral vagus nerve. And sleep does not arrive from sympathetic exhaustion. You can be absolutely exhausted, but if you're still on high alert, high vigilance, you're not going to sleep. Sleep arrives from the ventral vagal regulation. Tired's not enough for sleep. Why does nighttime make it actually worse? Right? Night does something specific to somebody who's vigilant. Now, vigilance doesn't have to be like, oh my God, something bad's going to happen. Vigilance can be a constant scanning inside the brain for events in life. What did that person say to me? Oh, how high is my bank account? Can I make the mortgage payment? And this constant scanning for threats. Night does something very specific to a vigilant system. The stimulation drops. Your room is dark. Your house is quiet. And a healthy system, a system that's in parasympathetic and dorsal vagal, reads the dropping stimulation as permission to wind down. A sensitized system reads the dropping stimulation as the absence of confirming safety signals. The body goes horizontal. Now, a healthy system reads horizontal as rest. A sensitized system, a system on high alert, reads horizontal as defenseless. The cognitive load recedes, the day job, the kids, the meetings, the screens, and all of it lets go at the same time. Now, I talk about things called affective memories. These are memories from your past that have unresolved negative emotional charge in them. And when everything lets go, the affective material that was held under all of that, under your busy day, floats to the surface. So you're laying there and your core temperature starts to drop. Perhaps your heart rate drops. Your interoceptive signals shift. And for a sensitized system, that shift can look like the early signature of a threat. Your body's cooling, your heart rate drops. If your sympathetic nervous system's on high alert, it thinks you're under threat. Your body's doing its job, but it has outdated orders at your amygdala. This is the sentry on the hill. Every night it happens. So if you go to bed at 11, the sentry's looking down the road in some sort of self-reinforcing loop. Now, Anne Germain at the University of Pittsburgh maps this as a loop. Noradrenaline activation fragments sleep onset. Noradrenaline is the adrenaline in your brain. And fragmented sleep impairs emotional decoupling during REM. Matthew Walker explains it this way. During the ultradian cycle, when we're in deep REM sleep, that's where we allow the disconnection of negative emotions from the content and context of our life. If you have fragmented sleep because of noradrenaline, that process doesn't happen. So the affective memory doesn't lose its charge. And the next day, it may actually be more reactive. And the more reactive day generates more affect for the next night when you try to process it again. The next night cannot process it because the noradrenaline activation has not stopped. And we go around and around this loop. And this is why just sleep more does not work. It's great advice, but it doesn't work. And so the system's not failing to sleep because it forgot how. The system is succeeding at vigilance because vigilance is what it learned was required for survival. Adding bed hours to a vigilance system gives the system more hours to be vigilant. I'll say that again. Some people just try and spend more time in bed. Well, it's just more time that the body perceives threat because the house is quiet, they're quiet, the heart rate's down. Sedation does not fix this. Benzos and antihistamines can put you under, but they also suppress REM and slow wave sleep. They sedate what is not the problem. They leave what is the problem unresolved. So they sedate the symptom. They leave the problem unresolved. And when the medication comes off, the loop is exactly where it was. What was sedated is not what was dysregulated. So what is the way out of this? The way out of this is to work with the affective memory. Kareem Nader at McGill University showed something way back in 2000 that changed how I work with people for the rest of my life. He showed that when an emotional memory, an affective memory from your past is reactivated, it becomes labial. It becomes soft and malleable. It becomes open to being updated. And for a window of up to 6 hours, the actual synaptic substrate, the structure of that memory, is editable. Another researcher at New York University took that into humans in 2010. She showed that fear memories reactivated and updated inside that window, that 6-hour window, did not return on the follow-up session. Brilliant. They were not suppressed, they were updated. And that's the mechanism for healing affective memories. So if the substrate of a really seriously negative emotional memory or a trauma memory drives insomnia is unresolved, so if the affective memory is unresolved, and if the affective memory can be updated, then the loop has a way out that does not require willpower, does not require melatonin, and doesn't require sleep hygiene. When we update the affective memory at the level the memory is encoded, sleep returns. The vigilance pattern loses its driver, the latent negative emotional charge. Metaphorically, the sentry on the top of the hill receives their order that they've been waiting for. In the pilot study we ran with the survivors of human trafficking, we measured symptom reduction with a survey from Veterans Administration called PSSI-5. Alongside the symptom reduction, all of those participants reported without us asking that they were sleeping better. Now, of course, the PSSI-5 has a sleep component which documented it, but they were giving us anecdotal evidence. The one person hadn't slept more than 4 hours for 25 years. And about 2/3 of the way through the protocol, they went home and they reported back. They said, "What have you done to me?" And I said, "What do you mean?" "I slept 12 hours. What have you done?" So sleeping, some of them for the first time in years. So we weren't targeting sleep. We targeted the affective memory, the traumatizing event, and sleep returned on its own. So there's a couple things I want you to take home tonight. 4 things, if you will. 4 principles. You can carry them, if we were alive, I'd say carry them out the door. If we were in the park in Ottawa, I'd say carry them out the park. But right now, you're just going to have to carry them offline. The first one is, to go to sleep, regulation has to happen before you get in the bed, not in the bed. If the first time you ask your system to disengage is at the moment the lights go off, your system is already behind. The 2 to 3 hours before we sleep are the wind down. And everybody teaches lower the light, lower the volume, lower the cognitive load. If sleep is entered from the ventral vagal, not from sympathetic arousal, then we have to start engaging that ventral vagal hours before. The second thing to take away, orientation beats rumination. A lot of people can't sleep. When you talk to them about what they do, before they sleep, they're ruminating. They're ruminating on their problems, on their conversations, all the stuff, right? Orientation beats rumination. A dysregulated system collapses inward and scans itself for threat. The fix is the opposite direction, outward. Go into peripheral vision. Send the eyes outward to see everything out here. And as you're sitting there seeing everything out there with your peripheral vision, hear all the sounds around you. Now you're seeing and hearing. And then become aware of the room temperature, the texture of the sheets. As Eckhart Tolle would say, you're in the now, hearing, seeing, and hearing in this moment. Slow awareness of the body in the room. And this is a sensory intervention. This isn't a thinking exercise. We're becoming seeing, hearing, feeling in this moment. And the very act of doing that stimulates parasympathetic arousal. Third, and probably the most important from my perspective, is find someone who can help you resolve the affective memory. Most trauma interventions that I'm aware of work with symptoms. Here we want to work with the root cause, the affective memory. And we want to do it within the scope of who we are, coach, clinician, psychiatrist, psychologist, peer. We want to do it with proper training. We want to do it with appropriate referral pathways. But we want to update the memory under reconsolidation conditions. So the memory's been activated, it's labial, it gets updated, and then it reconsolidates. And the vigilance the memory was driving stands down. And the last thing I want you to take away is treat sleep as an indicator, as evidence, not as a target. I could post a sign outside my door, sleep clinic, right? Easily doable. But that's not my target. That's my evidence. And I know that people who have sleep issues have unresolved affective memory issues. So when sleep starts to return without being chased, that return is one of the most reliable signals that underlying regulation is in place. If you coerce sleep and you get sedation, that doesn't help. Resolve the affective memory and you get sleep. So let's go back to that poor guy in 1954, back on the hill, back to the sentry. He's been standing there, standing watch since 1944. What gives him permission to stand down? Not an order shouted from the bottom of the hill, not a stranger telling him he's being ridiculous, not a pill that puts him to sleep at his post with the rifle still in his hands. What gives him permission is somebody walking up that hill, slowly, visibly, in a uniform he recognizes, with a flag he recognizes, showing him in a language his nervous system was trained in that the war is over, that his orders have changed. The road no longer needs watching. He can lower his rifle. He does not lower it because he was talked into it. He lowers it because the system finally received the signal it had been waiting for. And that's what I'm talking about tonight. So as we go through this series, I'm going to take you up to a hill slowly in a uniform the nervous system recognizes with orders that should have arrived a long time ago. And hopefully we can win some wars. You can help your clients sleep. And I'll do another presentation in 2 weeks. Thank you, guys.